that might be counted as extraordinary, but the majority of the men, except for their experiences, were unremarkable. I also encountered a couple of first-rate jackasses. In fact, in a couple of instances, the little mean man in me overpowered the objective historian and decided not to pursue otherwise promising stories, simply because the men who lived them were boorish, even contemptible. Although I have, in order to provide some context, included some amount of background, together with brief discussions of strategy and tactics, the stories in this work concentrate on the individuals. It is important for the reader to get a sense of who they were and where they came from. Too, it is important to understand what motivated them. And although their accounts were lightly edited for clarity and accuracy, a primary goal was to ensure that their voices were preserved as unique and individual. As I worked with these men, I was struck by a number of different aspects. Firstly, it was remarkable that so much was done so quickly. From a flat-footed start during the late 1930s until the end of the war in 1945, a very short span, the United States produced nearly 300,000 aircraft and trained more than 2 million airmen. And it was done without computers. From today's perspective, when it can take a decade or more to design, fund, and build a relatively simple highway project, this achievement is almost incredible. Nevertheless, it was hardly smooth and not always efficient. This was the conflict that gave us Catch-22 and Snafu. Leadership was occasionally poor, and equipment was sometimes shoddily designed and manufactured. Petty rivalries got in the way of greater things, and men often were lost, injured, or killed in the great crush of creating a military that could win the war. Additionally, as already noted, was the fact that these men were not innately special. Rather, they lived, adapted, and survived during a special time. Their personalities and inherent qualities were no different than those of my peers. And although we tend to see or remember them as old and grandfatherly, they very often drank and caroused and chased skirts with a vigor and enthusiasm that would land them in jail today. They were human. If it is popular to declare that today's generations are wanting, it should be considered that they are the products of the World War II generation. From those men came McCarthyism and the mistakes of Vietnam. Their children were the baby boomers, the caricatures of the 1960s. They were the flower children, the druggies, the hippies, and the draft dodgers. That fact notwithstanding, the World War II generation also raised brilliant, less flashy progeny while winning the Cold War and making our nation, with its manifold positive attributes, into the world leader it is today. The fact is that these men were individuals who came together to win a great cause, and much of that cause was won in dangerous skies. The stories here describe that winning. Prologue. All at once the old man stopped talking and tilted his face to the ceiling, so that the wet in his eyes wouldn't turn into tears and run down his cheeks. He remembered something, and it was suddenly difficult for him to talk about friends long gone, friends lost to an enemy who has become one of our nation's closest allies. "It doesn't seem fair," he said, "for the rest of us to have gone on and lived so long, married and children, and those poor guys. We didn't even bring most of them home. They were just gone. I still remember their faces." The man remembered the war and his friends as he knew them nearly 70 years ago. He remembered them as young, strong-willed, strong-bodied men who answered their nation's call to war.